Hereditary is a horror film released by A24 on June 8th, 2018. The film was written and directed by Ari Aster and stars Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, Gabriel Byrne, and Ann Dowd. The 2010s for AAA horror was largely punctuated by reboots, franchises, and the creation of cinematic universes similar to comic book franchises and the horror movies of old. Though this achieved varying degrees of success, it largely took away from the independent efforts of those who brought forth unique movies with passion behind them. Hereditary was a film that clawed its way out of the woodwork and made a name for itself as not only one of the scariest movies of the decade, but potentially one of the scariest ever. With a complex yet stripped down story, the movie has left a lasting taste in the mouths of purveyors of the grotesque. But how exactly does it accomplish this? What does it tap into to make us fear it with such reverence? In this review, we open the door to how this movie shows us family, and how they can be our best friend and our worst enemy. Just as a warning to those of you who haven't seen this movie yet, there are major spoilers ahead. If you wish to see this movie for yourself, without having anything spoiled for you, please click off the video now. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. The story begins with the funeral of Ellen Lee, showing her daughter Annie Graham delivering a speech at the service, while her husband Steve and her children Peter and Charlie look on. It is revealed through the eulogy that Ellen and Annie had a tense relationship, where Annie describes her mother as being private and reserved. The days following the funeral are tense as the family tries to reconcile the relationship they had, or rather, didn't have, with Ellen. Steve receives a call that Ellen's grave is desecrated, but he refuses to tell Annie about it. Annie, after thinking she saw the ghost of her mother in her study, goes to grief counseling, where she confesses before a group how her family was wrought with mental illness, with both her father and brother dying young, while her mother, before becoming dissociative near the end, manipulated Annie into allowing her to care for and groom Annie's daughter Charlie. Charlie is seen behaving very oddly in the days following the funeral, and when she is caught by Annie wandering off to a clearing by herself, she is berated before being sent to a high school party with Peter so he can watch over her. While Peter is in a separate room smoking up with friends though, Charlie eats a cake filled with nuts, causing her to have an allergic reaction which forces her and Peter to leave. While Peter is frantically trying to make it to the hospital, Charlie sticks her head out the window to try and breathe. It is at that moment that Peter is forced to swerve around a dead deer in the road, leading to Charlie being decapitated by a telephone pole. Peter drives home in a state of complete shock, going to bed with Charlie's body hanging out the car window. After Charlie's funeral and the grieving that followed, Annie attempts to return to the grief support session, but ends up turning to leave. Before she can, though, she is approached by a woman named Joan, who shares that her son and grandson died after Annie confesses what happened to Charlie. Joan gives Annie her number, saying to call her if she needed someone to talk to. Annie meets with Joan, where after recounting the awful details of Charlie's death, she also details an incident from 2 years before, when she had been sleepwalking. In her state, she had doused herself and Peter in paint thinner, only stopping herself from lighting them on fire when she woke herself up striking the match. As things begin to deteriorate at home, Annie runs into Joan while shopping. Joan takes Annie back to her place, where she performs a seance summoning Joan's grandson Louis. Though Annie is shaken by the event, Joan provides her with information for her to try it herself. That night, Annie has a dream where a trail of ants leads from her room to Peter's. She follows it, only to find Peter covered in ants before she comes to, standing in front of an awakened Peter. She confesses she never wanted to be his mother, that she was forced to by her own mother. As the two weep, they become doused in paint thinner, which is set alight, causing Annie to wake up. Annie wakes up Peter and Steve, setting up a seance in an effort to talk to Charlie. The seance goes badly. Charlie ends up possessing Annie before Annie is brought to by Steve throwing a glass of water in her face. The next night, Charlie returns in spirit form, drawing in her old sketchbook as Annie looks on. After walking in on Peter having a nightmare of having his head nearly pulled off, Annie takes Charlie's sketchbook and throws it into the fireplace, trying to destroy it. As the book begins to burn, though, Annie begins to catch fire, forcing her to pull it out. Annie tries to talk to Joan about what she experienced, but she is not home. Instead, she has tracked down Peter at his school, performing a ritual on him from afar. Annie rifles through old photo albums of her mother's, discovering Joan within its pages, and the photos seeming to portray some kind of cult. After searching the house further, Annie finds her mother's headless body in the attic. While this is happening, Peter seems to become possessed as an unseen force takes hold of him like a puppet, slamming his face into his desk. After Peter is brought home, Annie tells Steve everything that has happened, though initially Steve is convinced Annie was responsible for digging up Ellen's grave. Annie tells Steve they need to burn Charlie's sketchbook and set her free, though it will likely mean Annie will burn alive with it. When Steve refuses to throw it in, Annie does so, causing Steve to burn alive, while an unseen force takes possession of Annie. Peter wakes up from the day's events, finding the body of Steve, as well as strange people inside the house. Annie chases Peter into the attic, where he sees a photo of himself on the floor with his eyes gouged out. He looks up to the ceiling of the attic, where he sees Annie suspended in air, severing her own head. As this happens, Peter sees even more strange people within the attic, staring at him with smiles on their faces. Peter panics, jumping out the attic window and falling to the ground. In the final moments of the movie, a spectral force enters Peter. He wakes up, going to the treehouse where a gathering is being held. One of the participants collects a crown, placing it on Peter's head before hailing him as Payman, one of the 8 kings of hell. This movie is a lot. It's very enveloping and intriguing in how a lot it is, but that doesn't change the fact that if you aren't paying attention to everything happening on screen, you're liable to be a bit confused by the end of the movie, though this also lends itself to some rewatch value. The atmosphere of this movie is captivating, grabbing the attention of the viewer with an iron vice and refusing to let go. But it's not oppressively frightful in the way most horror movie junkies crave, at least not most of the time. Where this movie excels is in establishing an overarching movie-spanning tone of unease and discomfort. You always know something is not quite right, courtesy of the continuous presence of subtle supernatural elements in the lives of the Grahams. Whether it manifests in the dreams they have, the rituals they conduct, or the snippets of information gleaned from an old photo album or a throw cushion, you constantly feel uneasy because you never quite understand why some things are happening until the end of the movie. And this feeling of gnawing unease only ever falters to give way to violent discomfort. The difficulty of reconciling the past, first with the death of Ellen, then with the death of Charlie, makes the already unsteady dynamic of the Graham family more volatile with every passing day. In personal moments, like Steve walking in on Annie constructing a miniature of Charlie's death, Peter breaking down crying after the seance with Charlie's spirit, and the infamous fight at the dinner table, you really start to see this movie in a totally different light. Beyond being present within a horror movie, making it nigh unbearable as it is, these kind of interactions not only compose the bulk of the movie, but also pepper the lives of everyone every day, with the words on screen hitting a little too close to home in the audience because of it. All that said though, the final moments of the movie following Peter's journey from his bedroom to the attic are almost unbearably tense. Dead silence and near total darkness, combined with the shadowy silhouettes of demented home invaders, and Annie's R-rated take on Spider-Man's wall crawl, do nothing if not set off alarm bells in the heads of everyone watching that something terrible is about to go down. And go down it does when Peter takes his deadly dolphin dive through the attic window. While the ending ceremony in the treehouse is greatly beneficial in tying together every aspect of the movie we've witnessed, it may also come as a head-scratching shock to those who were still convinced that they were watching a family drama. So do try to keep your eyes open, no matter how hard the movie is trying to make you cover them. The acting here is absolutely phenomenal in the most natural yet imperfect of ways. Toni Collette runs away with an incredibly nuanced yet visceral performance. She perfectly captures the range of emotions necessary to tell the complicated tale of a daughter trying to digest the death of a mother she had no love for, a mother bent and broken by the death of a daughter she loved with all her heart, and a woman trying her best to pick apart a mystery that no one else close to her believes is real. Alex Wolff is another major highlight, with his transition from a carefree, party-loving teenager to an emotionally traumatized and guilt-ridden kid feeling painfully real, especially as he goes through the motions of his disinterested mother slowly becoming more frantic and seemingly unhinged. Gabriel Byrne is a performance that is far more subdued than the rest, but his role as the Rock trying to ground his family in a whirlwind is one that really completes the dynamic of this dysfunctional family. His calm and reserved demeanor is what keeps Peter from mentally succumbing to the horrors he does not understand, while also being the seed of doubt that keeps Annie from getting the support she needs to put together what is happening. The soundtrack for this movie is very minimal, with most of the movie's scenes being accompanied with silence, but when it does show up, it excels in making you want to exhale the lump it forms in your throat. The pitchy tones and the rolling lows really do set the scene for making the anxiety that this movie loves to throw at you so much worse. Couple that with camera work that brings both style, subtle visuals, and an incredible, while at times agonizing attention to detail to life, and the movie really comes together as what feels more like a personal experience than an act played out on screen. But, as is usually the case, there's still some less nice things to be said about the movie. The shortfall of the movie is that perhaps it has too much going on to catch all at once. Though the movie is able to capture every essential detail for you to put everything together, provided you are attentive enough, most people will struggle to understand it all in one fell swoop. For audiences hiding behind their hands in the moments of dreadful terror or dealing with family quarrels putting a knot in their gut, some details may go unnoticed, leaving a bit of confusion by the end of why the family is being stalked by a cult and how their wily coyote scheming resulted in them summoning a literal king of hell. Again, rewatches can help alleviate this issue, but for the more squeamish who don't care to subject themselves to their definition of insanity, this may not be in the cards. The other thing is that once you get past the scene with Charlie's seance, the family drama dynamic takes the back burner to the supernatural elements setting up the final scene. This makes the brewing threat of familial collapse that loomed so large over Act 1 somewhat evaporate, instead just having Peter be haunted while Annie tries to play detective while Steve is off with his head in his hands. Bit of wasted potential for the family to really collapse in on itself and make the ending of the film that much harder to watch. But hey, I guess summoning a literal king of hell is a kind of big deal compared to fighting about who's gonna take out the trash, so we'll just have to visit that another day. The final rating for this spirited family get-together is 8 out of 10. The movie requires serious attention and commitment from its audience where getting its point across is concerned. But with such a high caliber of acting, such eye-catching visuals, and a potent and messy thematic story that resonates beyond the screen, many will have a hard time looking away from the offerings of this house of horrors. You will, however, end up falling down a rabbit hole of research more time-draining than a game of 5 clicks to Jesus on Wikipedia. You've been warned.
And that will be it for today. Thank you all for stopping by. If for whatever reason you enjoyed what you saw today, consider sticking around, maybe leaving a like or subscribing if you wish. And if you have any recommendations for movies you want to see reviewed in the future, be sure to drop those down in the comments. There's plenty more to come, so if that's something you care about, I'll see you when I see you.